Welcome back everyone. Today we're going to take a look at finishing up the versions for tricks. I apologize in advance, this episode might be a little bit sloppy because I'm just back from holiday, and we're mainly going to be fixing a bunch of the messes that I've introduced in the previous episode. Okay, so first of all, what we're going to start with is the models. So as we're developing, all this stuff is still pretty much malleable, and the primary thing that I want to take a look at is introducing the IDs for tricks and stuff like that, because as you can see here in our AppDB context, what we did with all these keys, as I thought about it, it was a little bit too messy. So what we're going to do is we're going to instead rely on individual IDs and still query by the slug and stuff like that. But let's go ahead and just get started. And what we're going to do is on our temporal model is we're going to introduce a prop of integer, and we're going to say that it will have an ID now. What this means for our other models is if we go into moderation, let's go ahead, just remove the ID from here. On our review, we'll remove the ID as well. Category, this actually doesn't need to change because all we do here now is we just have an ID. Comment, we don't really need the ID on here either. Difficulty will have the ID. Submission, we can remove the ID. Trick will now have the AD. Trick category, what will happen now is the trick ID will just be an integer and we no longer need the version. The version on the category can be removed as well, because just remember that the ID is that representation of the slug and version at the same time. Okay. Trick relationship, same thing is going to happen. We're just replacing the prerequisite and progression ID string IDs, which were slugs previously. Now they're going to be actual integer IDs. On the user, again, we are just going to put, we'll just say new string ID to remove a little error, just so we're saying we're basically overriding the integer ID with the string ID. Next thing on the video, again, we're just going to remove the int ID. We're going to have a bunch of errors now. So for now, we won't touch the models. We'll go into the AppDB context. We'll remove these key configurations that we had for trick, category, and difficulty, because now the actual ID is the ID, right? Next thing that we want to do is just remove the versions on here. And for the other stuff, we will just, again, we will default for the categories. Actually, I think we can just remove that part and the second configuration as well. I don't think we don't need to hold entity framework's hand when handling the one-to-many relationship for the trick categories. Or actually, is it one-to-many? No, it's many-to-many. We don't need to handle that. It will basically know how to deal with it on its own, right? Let me close everything and go back to the AppDB context. Next thing is the prerequisite stuff. Prerequisite and progressions. Essentially, again, the key that we're configuring is going to be still a composite key. However, it's just going to rely on the two IDs of the relationship. The other stuff, we just want to single it out to the individual key, just like it was before. So just like that. Next thing, let's just go ahead and fix up a couple of things in our API. So let's close the AppDB context, into the controllers, into the category controller. Now, because we have the ID here, so because we're going to be getting a specific tricks for a specific ID, this might need to change in the future, because what could happen is if we're navigating to a category, we might have the slug in the URL, although we might still in the background be passing the actual ID to fetch the tricks, right? So for now, we will change this to an integer, but just keep in mind that this might change in the future as well, and how we're going to handle this. Again, we will think about that later. Next, in the trick controller, kind of the same things are going to happen here. So first thing is this error here where we set the ID on the trick category, the things that we have in the trick form, and how we are setting these prerequisites here in the update. Let's go ahead and just change the string that we're collecting here on into a integer, and I think that should basically handle that. Now, because we've solved the errors here, the last bit of the errors are in the program.cs file, and all we're going to do here is we're just going to manually set the IDs for these objects and be done with it. So ID equals 1. First we'll start with the difficulty, so let me go ahead use column insertion mode here. Let me give me 1, 2, 3. And then I will select about yay much, put the same thing here. Now what I want to do is just grab one of these, each ones, put them here. Oh, here, 2. And the third trick is 3. Next thing is to fix the IDs that we're setting here. So all these categories are flips. The flip category is ID number 2. So let's go ahead and set 2 here. 2 here, and 2 here. For the prerequisite, we had a backwards roll, so backwards roll was 1. So let's go ahead and set this to 1. The rest of it seems fine. So what we're going to do next is going to do with the moderation stuff. So let me go ahead and close all of this stuff into the moderation item. Now, because the ID that we're using is actually an integer now, we can use the target to be an integer, and the target version no longer needs to be there either. What I'm actually going to do is I'm going to duplicate the target property, and I'm going to add a current property as well. So this is going to be pretty much where we start and where we're going to go to. So when we're actually going to go to display this on the page as well, this will allow us to show the previous version alongside with the version that we're trying to change over to. So that might be some future works as well, essentially. So going to the tricks controller now, let's go ahead and fix up where we create the moderation items for the actual creates of the trick and the updates of the trick. Now, when we create the trick, the current version is going to be missing because there is no current version. So we're just going to omit that, and that's just going to be 0. The actual thing that we want to be passing is the ID. Now, the ID is not going to be created until we save to the database. So what we want to do is we want to first add the trick, save it, and then add the moderation item and save it, because this is where the ID is going to be generated. Next thing, in the update, pretty much the same thing is going to happen. So we're going to have the save changes async. We're going to save it here. And the target version, we want to get rid of that. We want to supply the trick ID for the current right here. And the second ID should be coming from the new trick. So let's go ahead and replace this with the new trick.id. And that's pretty much what we're going to be migrating from to. And if there are going to be 2 versions, what we essentially have here is essentially kind of like a ladder. So if this is our current version and we want to go to the next version, if before we migrate to that second version, there could be potentially infinite amount of versions that could be created from this base one, because many people might want to do their changes. But what will happen is from here, you will have version number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, and so on. So it's going to grow like a ladder, infinitely vertically, right? So instead of controlling it this way, where we grab the next version and we jump to it and stuff like that, what I want to do is I actually want to have the base version, and all the next versions are going to be scaling horizontally. So all of them, if we're on version 1, all of them are going to be version 2s. And then once we actually bump to one of them, all the other versions are going to be outdated, because the version is going to be either equals or smaller. So for example, if the first change comes from version 1 onto version 2, and then we migrate it to some other version 2, it becomes outdated. If somebody then makes another edit to version 3 and we bump to that, if this update has never been updated to come from this version 3, so like it becomes the next version, potential version 4, we basically mark it outdated if it's either the same version or it's a version below, right? So this actually simplifies this bit a little bit. We don't have to do another read from the database. we will just take the version and just bump it by 1 from the original trick that we are, trying to edit. This will also simplify a bunch of stuff, how we go around doing this in the version migration context. So first of all, let's go ahead into program.cs and we'll just fix up this stuff a little bit. So forward roll, where we set the ID, that's going to be 3. I'm going to save that. And going to the moderation items controller, this is mainly the part that's breaking, where we were passing a bunch of stuff into the migration context, or the version migration context as it's called there. There are a couple of fixes that I wanted to introduce here as well. So let's go ahead and open up the version migration context. And just to make it a lot more simpler, what I'm going to do is, for all these parameters, I'm just going to go ahead and pass the moderation item, and I'm going to call it mod item. So this whole thing that I've been looking at it, and I think it can actually be quite simplified, essentially. The actual thing that we are going to return is a private iQueryable. So we're going to be returning a query, or as I'm going to refer to as the source. And for the source, it is going to be some kind of version model. So we don't know what exact versioned model we are performing the operations on. We just know that the source is going to be of some kind of version model. So we're just going to try to put our DB set into this interface. And if you're confused a little bit why it's an iQueryable, so if we go into tricks and we take a look at the DB set itself, it's an abstract class that inherits from iQueryable T entity. So our DB set trick, and because trick inherits from a version model at some point, can fit this basically, like if you imagine like square circle pegs, it fits one of those, right? So anyway, going back to the version migration context, this is the thing that we want to peg our DB set into. And we're just going to call this get source. And the thing that we're going to pass into here is just the type. And most of this stuff is still valid. So here we're just going to grab the type. And instead of doing this query, what we're going to do is we're just going to return context, tricks, and that's about it. The exception can still be thrown like this. We can remove this function because we no longer need it. And actually, let me bring it back because I still want to grab the current and next version. So let's just copy those. We'll put these here. And now we want to use the get source to get the source. So let's go ahead and get the source. We will put the mod item type into here. And by the end of it, we will end up with some source which we can query. So now using the source, we can grab the current version and the next version. The active one we no longer need it because we're actually going off by the ID. And the ID is something that the version model is going to have. And mod item, so we're going to be going off the current. Let's go ahead and copy this query. We're going to put it here. And again, versions, we don't need those. We just got to make sure that we are grabbing it by the target ID here as well. And again, we're just comparing the ID. We can, next one, again, we can call it target just for consistency because that's what we're trying to go from current to, right? So it's just like walking in real life. You're trying to get from one place into the other. That's kind of what functions are, just mapping stuff. We're just getting from one place into the other and stuff like that. Very, very basic core operation that's already ingrained in our minds, right? So the rollover of the IDs, this is something that we will actually have to perform on the moderation item now, because essentially for every version that we're trying to migrate to, what's going to happen is the current version of the moderation item is going to be still pointing to that previous lower version, even though we've migrated it here. So for all the previous moderation items, we just want to make sure that they are bumped up, and the moderation item will essentially have a pointer to the current version. So for all the changes that come from version 1 onto version 2, we're just going to say that now the current one is coming from version 1 into version 2, and the current ones are all going to be version 2. So if the current is version 2, but the edit is for target and that's version 2, that's a net. So that's how we're going to figure out about the versioning. And again, because of this to-do comment where we are going to make this async safe, so we're basically going to make sure that only maybe one migration is happening at a time per record, or one migration is happening at a time period. Like, how fine-grained do we want to get? And because I don't really think these are going to be happening like extremely often, this is not like a high throughput environment, this is going to be a result of a user action, and I don't think that there is going to be that much of a collision to basically, and it's not going to be such a long task that will require this to be a sort of a very fine-tuned funnel that should prevent basically concurrency errors. So going back to the version migration context, how we're going to migrate our moderation IDs essentially, or rather moderation items. So if we take a look at the moderation item, it is inheriting from the temporal model, which does have the deleted property. And once we do actually mark it where it's deleted, this is the part where we want to grab everything, all the moderation items for a specific type that aren't closed, and just bump the version after we have successfully migrated, right? So if we are setting that the current version is no longer active, let's go ahead and grab the current moderation items, and we'll go to the context, moderation items, select, or no, what was it? Let's just to list here first. And the actual where clause, first of all, what we're going to do is we're going to say where it's not deleted, and where the type equals the type on the moderation item, right? So we're going off the same types. And the main thing to not get twisted is that we don't want to actually bump the moderation item that we're currently using, right? So we want to actually omit the moderation item that is currently in the process with this last clause here. So moderation items, right? Just a little bit of misspelling. So yeah. So then for all the moderation items, outdated mod item and the current moderation, let's just call them outdated because they are outdated. Let's replace this. And for all our outdated moderation items, what we want to do is we want to grab the current version and set it to the target version ID, right? Just remember that current ones are, the current and the target are not versions, they're the identifiers, and the identifiers are essentially kind of linked to the version and the slug, because we're primarily going off the slug and the version. And sorry that I keep rambling on about this. I understand that sometimes when you're following someone else's thoughts, it could be a little bit hard to follow if you're not coming up with this idea. So that's primarily why I'm repeating myself, so it kind of like gets ingrained into your head. So you can see here, writer is telling me that this could potentially be null, and for God knows whatever reason, this could be null. So let's go ahead and make sure that if this is null, we're just going to go ahead and throw a new invalid operation exception. And target not found. All right. So that's just if we don't find the target. What could then potentially happen here in the current version is if the current version, or rather, let's say the target dot version minus current version, and this is the part where I said about the bouncing from version to version, is equals, or let's say less than or equals to 0. So if the current version is 2 and the target version is 2, it's a no-go. If the current version is 2 and the target version is 3, that's the part where we actually 3 minus 2, we get 1. So that's when we allow it to migrate. If the current version is 3 and the target version is 2, so that's going to be minus 2 minus 3, that's minus 1. That's when we have a version balance. So if it's basically if the target version is the difference is 0 or less, that's when we want to throw an exception. I'm gonna actually go out and put a custom exception for this. So let's create a public class invalid version exception, and this is a class, so let's inherit from exception. And what we're going to do is we're going to have let's actually generate a constructor. So alt enter generate a constructor with a message. I'm going to remove that question mark, so that should never be nullable, because let's actually delete this function here. I no longer need it because I've already copied over the way that I get the current and the target. In here, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to throw this exception. So throw new invalid version exception, and here you can get creative, but here we're going to say that the current version is let's see, version is, and let me actually put the $sign here. Let's say version, target version is, let's say target version, and let's say what type it is, right? So for what type are we actually checking this? So and type. And then because we might add a little bit more logging when we actually catch this process, but for now, I mean, make this error throw as much of an explanation as you think this might needs. I think this is okay. Might include some IDs, but in the logger we can actually capture what user is trying to migrate, or like basically whatever's happening. But for now, I think this is okay. So we're going to be capturing this, and I've actually just noticed that this is meant to be less than or equals to 0, so almost a big derp there, but that's fine. We are just setting the current one active to false. We are then basically bumping the IDs on all of our moderation items to basically, once we display it in the UI, we will then be able to show if it's outdated or not. We're then setting the target to false, and then the temporary bit, I don't think we'll actually need it, so I'm just going to delete this property, and I'm going to get rid of this as well. The to-do here, we've actually sorted this out now, and as it goes for this process, we don't need to do anything with the versions because that's already kind of handled automatically. So for the moderation item controller, all we have to do here is pass the mod item, and this should be sound. So I think this is it for the moderation items and stuff like that. So most of the work on the back end is sort of done at this point. We'll have to come back there in just a second. I appreciate this is going to be a long episode, but I actually want to get this versioning stuff sorted out. Let's go ahead and into our underscore trick. This is where we are displaying the trick, and this is where we actually want to do the editing for the trick itself. So let's go into the UI bit, and let me open up the console, and we'll be working with the backflip. So you will see some of the stuff is broken, and I think if we go into the transitions, yeah, you can see here where we're actually passing the slug into the API URL. It's actually, breaking because we changed it to an integer. So there's some stuff that's broken. I'm aware of this. We will fix it. Don't worry. Let's go into the backflip, and here is essentially where we have a trick, and if you're logged in, you should be able to change it. If you're not logged in, the button should be grayed out and stuff like that. So for now, we'll leave that part. We will sort it out later. Just try to focus on this one little bit where we want to try to edit this trick. Okay, so that's the primary aim of what we're doing here. So on here, let's go ahead and just add a button. I'm just going to go ahead, grab this divider. I'm going to put a div on here, and through this div, let me go ahead and add a V button, and I'll just say edit on here. I will make it outlined to make it look pretty, and just make it small as well because, why not? So let's see it. I think there might not be a lot of space there, but again, once we actually have it looking a little bit better, we might fix it up a little bit. So when we click this edit button, I want to bring it back up to this sort of screen, and the information that we should have in this form should be refilled out when we press edit. So let's go ahead and get ourselves an edit function. Do we have any methods here? No, we don't. So here we have the edit function. For the trick that we actually have all the data that we need here. And because I think this is the view model, let's go into the APIs and view models. And first what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that we're actually getting the ID, because this is going to be crucial to actually editing. And I mean, sometimes, I don't know if you've been learning view models and stuff like that, and at some point somebody was like, you never want to pass the IDs into your view, or which it's okay to have the ID of your record in the view. Okay, it's not that big of a deal. Just I just want to disperse those thoughts if you have those thoughts. Okay, so trick view models, just have the ID in there. It's okay. The ID is going to now end up on here, and when we actually send it to be edited, it's going to be there. Okay, so on the edit, all right, we press the edit. What do we want to happen? So on the actual model that pops up here is initiated by our store video upload. And again, the naming at the moment already seems a little bit iffy. We might want to edit that as well. But what I will do is when we activate it, I want to say, do we activate this model for the purpose of editing? If so, then put this flag. And if we're editing, what are we actually editing? So I'm gonna have an edit payload here. And if we're editing, let's go ahead, set some kind of a flag, and we will also want to set this edit payload. So let's go ahead and say, are we editing? With obviously false to start with, and edit payload is going to be null to start with as well. So on the state then, editing, set this to true. And this actually, well, because we're using a store, it doesn't matter what really we're editing, because the payload here is dynamic, and once we actually display the component, depending on which component is going to be editing that payload, I mean, it can work on the same payload. We just have to load that payload into the components form when it gets created, when it gets opened up, and stuff like that. So yeah, let's go ahead and set the payload as well. So edit payload, and we'll set it to edit payload. To not break current functionality, we will just set some default values as well. And yeah, just false and null, right? So because by default, when we open these up, we don't actually supply any of these values. So let's just provide some sensible defaults so we don't break stuff. Once we have this, let's go ahead into our trick steps, right? And this is the part where we have our model that is basically operating on this form, right? When this component gets created, what we want to do is we want to go ahead and grab this editing payload and set it on this form. Okay, so what I will have to do is I will have to map state, because I want to get the state of the video upload, and the actual thing that I want to grab is editing payload. And actually, let's go ahead and grab edit as well, or editing. I think that's what we named it. Yeah, so editing and edit payload. So we got these two, and I mean, pretty self-explanatory. The only part is really that we're going to use object assign to really get that deep reactivity for the properties or attributes of our object, so we're not going to lose it, right? Then this form, we assign an edit payload, and if you are ever confused which parameter is which, you can obviously F12 to inspect it, because you're using writer, and this is what we're assigning to. And same as an assignment operator, kind of like how you have a equals to, what we're assigning to is on the left hand side, the value is on the right hand side, right? So same thing here is in case of object.assign, right? So left hand side, right hand side gets assigned to left hand side, right? And this is where we're essentially just assigning the object. There's not too much here. So, I mean, this should happen automatically. I'm not going to dwell too much on this. What we actually want to do is grab the mutation that we have here, so this activate mutation, and be able to initialize it from this edit object, right? So let's go ahead and okay, so the methods, yep, let's go ahead and map mutations. I think, yep, it will let me import it here. So let's go ahead and grab it from the video upload. And let's go ahead and get the activate into here. Again, I'm just going to check it with F12 that I can navigate to it. And on here, let's go ahead and grab this, not this edit, activate. And the stuff that we want to pass here is actually, we want to be able to set the component here as well. So the thing that we're setting is trick steps, it's called. I don't think, yeah, it doesn't let me import it straight away here, but let's go ahead and grab our trick steps from here. And I'll replace the path with components slash, was it content creation and trick steps .view, right? So there's the component. This is where it gets set. We want to set the edit flag to true and editing payload, this trick. And I mean, that's pretty much it. Let me go ahead and put this on a new line so it's a little bit easier to see. And that's essentially what happens. Another neat thing that we can actually take a look at. So if I just refresh this for good measure, if I press edit, nothing happens because my oh my, I have forgot to bind the event, but it's okay. So now, okay, I press edit, stuff gets loaded. Cool. One thing is we are missing the categories, prerequisites, and progressions, if there are any. Again, because there's that mismatch of IDs, but that again, I'm gonna say that is okay for now, but we'll fix that later. Let's go ahead, close this, and one thing that I'm gonna just drag your attention to is if we're on the smaller screen, what will happen is this window here will still be open. So I actually want to close that as soon as we press edit. So the way that we're going to do this is just an interesting thing. I think I said a couple episodes ago that I don't know, I haven't really learned how to use passing props into into slots, like if how we had that on event. So in the item content layout where we're displaying it here, right? The item. Let's go ahead and do this, right? This on event that we didn't know how to use, I've actually go ahead and learned it for this part. So let's go ahead and use it. So what we want to do is we actually want to close this dialog from this page when we actually click edit, right? So what we're going to do is on the slot, we want to pass something into the slot, okay? And the actual thing that we're actually going to pass is, let's go ahead and bind some kind of attribute, and the attribute is going to be a function. And the function is going to be really simple. We're just going to be setting the dialog to false, right? So, and that's all it is. So we've essentially just created a function that could be used by this slot. Let's go ahead and copy this because we actually have it in two places here, and otherwise we'll get like close is not a function, yada yada. This one's just going to be an empty function. So this actually doesn't do anything. So going into the trick, now that we have this here, we will actually have to separate it like this. So, not comma separated, but semicolons, right? So we run the first thing and then we run the second thing. And the actual way on the template where we bind vSlot item, this is the part where we will say just expand the close from here. And now we can actually take this close and call it here, right? So going back to the backflip, if we open it from here, and again, because this is your application, you can do what you want. You can see now that if I don't know what that jitter was, if we press edit, you can see that it closes there in the background, and the form opens. So for now, I'll leave it like, I think it was a cool little thing to learn how to do. Now, I mean, let's get to the juice of the tutorial, essentially, right? We're doing versioning. So let's go ahead and do an edit. We'll do next, and we'll do save. We are going to get an error. Let's go ahead and take a look at what it is. If we will have anything here. No, we don't. Let me, whatever that was, if it's a 400, it might be something that we have actually returned. So let's go ahead and open up a trick controller and take a look at this. Let me double check the console again. Doesn't seem like there are any errors here. Moderate does not contain a definition for target version, but we've restarted since then. So let's go ahead and take a look at what we actually called. So this function right here, one or more validation errors occurred. So that's all right. Let's see what post. I think we. Okay, so we actually made a post. So we posted our update into the create function. So my bad. This is where on the trick steps, when we save, we actually go to create the trick. So let's go into tricks where we have create the trick. Let's go ahead, copy this. The validation errors, we should probably make it a little bit more intuitive or catch some kind of error and display it. But for now, let's go ahead and just focus again. Just focus on the task. We want to update a trick. So for update of the trick, it's going to look pretty much the same. We're just going to use put here. And again, let's just go ahead and refresh this and go through the process again, right? I'm just going to do some kind of silly edit. Let's go ahead and save. It's still going to give me a 400. We're still doing a post, so I'm still being a sausage. So here we have the update trick. Let's actually use it, right? So if this editing, so if we're editing, let's go ahead and update the trick, right? So I'm just going to copy this, put this here. There we go, right? Otherwise, create the trick. So if we're editing, update the trick. Otherwise, create the trick, right? Nothing too crazy. What is it telling me here? Invalid number of arguments. Let me take a look. No, it isn't. That's because I don't think I've actually imported the function here. Okay, so it seems like after a holiday, my brain shuts down a little bit quicker, so I'm losing a little bit of touch, but we'll get through this tutorial, I promise you. Updating the trick here, let's go ahead. Again, we'll do this again, and primarily because what I want to do is I want to get to the moderation page where we're going to have a bunch of errors because of how we do things right now. And now we get a put error again, more than one validation errors. Quickly scroll through the logs. Okay, so at this point, I am just going to say I have no clue what's going on or why it's breaking. Let's go ahead into the update bit. And actually, the bit right here on the trick form, the ID. Okay, so this makes quite a bit of sense because the form itself, the string ID shouldn't really be a string ID anymore. It should actually be an integer ID. And I'm wondering if this is going to break anything here, which it doesn't, which makes me think a little bit. But okay, I don't know what's happening here. I'm assuming the create. I'm not going to focus on the create. We're going to focus on the update, right? So again, we're going to put the ID here. So we're actually going to be grabbing the correct thing. And I actually want to check the errors here. And what did we actually pass? So prerequisites R1, and okay, so this is 2. So it's an array of integers. The rest of the stuff looks pretty much fine. Let's go ahead and try to just call save again. Okay, and this time it succeeded. So we still had the form, and because we didn't clear it, it's still there. And now that it's actually closed, it's actually been cleared. So if we go into the moderation items, here it is. So again, because we have IDs, I know it's a little bit messed up at the moment, but bear with this. Now, because we no longer have the slugs in the moderation item, the URL here that you might see, like this little Chrome helper, like pop up right in the bottom left corner of the URL. You can inspect the URL as well, but essentially it's no longer going to be valid because it's just gonna, or yeah, it's gonna get a bunch of stuff from places where it doesn't exist. So again, I'm not going to ramble on too much. Let's go ahead and fix it and make it work for the current way that we're doing it, right? So let's go into the moderation. All the we're going to keep the mod ID, but we're going to get rid of the type and trick ID. we're gonna get the moderation item, and then we're gonna display the stuff there. So Control X to cut it, Control V. Not sure what happened there, but we're essentially going to get rid of all of this stuff. And for the trick ID, we are just going to have the mod ID. Okay. So in the index page for where we're displaying the moderation items, what I want to do is I want to get rid of the type and the target. Okay, so it's just going to be the moderation ID here, and just like that. So we save that, and once we navigate, we only have the moderation ID. That means whatever this, what is that thing? Whatever. If you know what that thing was, just leave it in the comments. I'm not that interested to find out. It takes me like 1 second to delete it, right? Right, going to the moderation item, the biggest part that we want to figure out is this created clause. So because we no longer have the type and the trick ID, so we will remove these, and these two methods will essentially just break. What I actually wanted to happen is, again, let me just close all the windows. I will reopen mod ID again, and I will reopen the moderation item controller. So again, just narrow the scope where we're working. Where we're getting the moderation item, this is the part where I want to actually expand it to, because this is how we're going to get our current and target ID. So we will have to create a view model for this, because I also want to include comments and reviews, and comments and reviews contain the moderation item link where it has. So again, not going over this too much, but essentially there's going to be this cyclical relationship. That's why I know I will need a, what's it called, a view model for this. So dropping this down to a new line, let's go ahead, grab the trick view model. I'm just going to copy it and get rid of the copy, get rid of the trick, and I'm going to call this moderation item view models. Again, F2, Control C to copy the name, put it here. Trick, replace it with moderation item, put it in trick here, and that's it. So that looks pretty much okay. Let's go ahead, get the current, get the target, get the type so we can get the endpoint, and go looking at the moderation item again. So we got these three parts. We actually want the comments and the reviews now. So to actually get those in the moderation item controller, what we will need to do is we will need to include them, right? Simple. Just give me the comments and get me the reviews, right? Super simple. So let's close tricks view model, and first of all, let's replace this with mod item, right? So it's no longer a trick, it's a moderation item. On the moderation item, what we want to do is we want to grab the comments and then make them as queryable. Then we want to select, and we already built the view models for this, so this is how you can reuse this. So comment view models, projection to list. Simple. Let's copy this. Categories, these are not going to be categories. These are going to be models and comments, I mean, and these are going to be reviews. So let's copy this property. Let's put the reviews here, and here we're going to have a reviews view model, and let's go ahead and grab the projection from here. I mean, that's pretty much the view model. On the moderation items controller, we are using an integer ID here, because now that we are going to do a select of moderation item view models, and we're going to be grabbing the projection, this bit here, the first or default, will actually have to be turned into a where clause, and the expression that we do on the first or default will actually can actually be removed, and we can actually just return an object here for now. So yeah, just grabbing a single moderation item with its comments and reviews, and current and target. So that's how we're gonna obtain current, target, comments, and reviews. Going back to the mod item, let's go ahead and remove this endpoint here. And here we're just gonna have, actually, we will remove this part there as well. We will make this method asynchronous, and I just wanna get, oh, I jumped there, didn't mean to. We're just gonna get the mod item by waiting on get, and with the mod item, for this comments, mod item dot comments. All right, and then reviews, we're gonna put the reviews here as well. So let me format this a little bit. Then we're gonna have the current and target ID. So the type should exist on the mod item, right? Because mod item, because on the moderation view model we actually supply the type, so it's going to be here. Next thing, I will keep the item as the item. We will probably rename it later, but what I will do right now is I will just add a current. For the current, we're gonna do mod item current, and for the target, we are going to get the target. Now, primary thing that you may notice is, or remember, is that current and target are still integers, right? They're no longer slugs. So we will actually have to go and fix our endpoint. And much how I talked in the beginning or somewhere in the middle of the episode, where we are going to change our endpoints to work with integers, or we might handle that. Trick is going to be the first part where we're going to handle that, and we might abstract that into somehow like a resolver or something like that to work either with the ID as an integer or with a slug. Another thing about this is here you can see we're awaiting. Here you can see we're just making these two calls and they're just going into the void. At some point they're going to return and set these items. So this happens asynchronously. These two are going to happen simultaneously, okay? It's because we need to actually know the mod item before we kick off these two tasks as well. So one thing, the endpoints currently don't work. So let's go ahead into the tricks controller. And in the tricks controller here, where we have a get for individual tricks, we have a string ID. Let's go ahead and expand this out a little bit. And what we're going to have is the initial query. And this is the part where we're just going to grab this part here and the query, right? But we're still using a query, so we're just kind of like separating it a little bit. We can then have an action result because we might have a trick, we might not have a trick. Let's go ahead, grab a trick, and then if trick is null, we can return no content. Otherwise, just return OK with the trick. And that's pretty much standard stuff. But the more interesting stuff is going to happen here, where what could happen is the ID might be an integer. So we want to try and parse it. We will supply an ID, and this is a common pattern of try do something, and you supply a value, and out comes your value if it is true. So I'm just going to say that it's an integer ID, and at this point, what I want to do is I want to amend the where clause of the query. So for the query, what I'm going to do is I'm going to assign it a query, but with a new where. So in the where, I'm going to say ID equals the integer ID. And that's just what's going to happen. Now, at the moment, this is a DB set. And what we can do is call this an as queryable. And now this is going to be an iQueryable of trick, where still returns an iQueryable of trick. And that's it. And we no longer really need the active here because we're going off at the ID. We will still need the active when we're getting it by the slug. And I mean, this is what should happen. And obviously this part right here is could be very common if somebody misspells the URL or whatever. If somebody ever navigates like that to your, or you never know users, but this can actually be quite a common thing. Another important bit is the tricks, right? The names of the tricks, because the slug comes from the name. We don't actually ever want to have only numbers. So this is a validation clause that we will need to handle quite carefully, because if, for example, if there is a 540 kick, it will need the kick prefix, because if the trick is just called 540, as in 540, that could be an identifier, right? So we want to be handling those special cases. Otherwise, the query pretty much looks like this, where we grab these two clauses and append them to the query here. What I will do is I'll actually just go ahead and put this active on top of this query and just have it on one line. I mean, you can just kind of put it down there for prettiness sake. But otherwise, that's pretty much it. So if we successfully parse the thing that's coming in as an integer identifier, that means it's this part here that's calling it, right? If some user decides to hit this endpoint manually for whatever reason, I mean, I don't mind. I really don't mind if somebody uses their programming knowledge to look at the traffic, figure out the ID, and scrape it with the identifier, right? Doesn't really bother me that much. But this part should essentially take care of fetching our tricks by the integer ID. And if we implement this for some other trick, again, we can probably do this off by making some abstraction around the temporal model, same way that we did the abstraction with the version migration context around the iQueryable version model, right? So this example right here is very powerful if you've never done something like this, because this approach can basically help you create a function that will single-handedly handle all the cases for all temporal models, and it's just something that you can do to reduce the bulk of your code. But anyway, let's go ahead and close all of this. Again, we'll come back to the mod ID where we're going to be trying to, let's refresh this. The edit is gone, but we have this trick right here, and if we press on this, you can see we still get the trick here. And you can see this one is the current one, so we get a 204, and that's fine. So immediately the no content is fine in this case. And then we look for the 3. So let's go ahead and make sure that this actually grabs both of the current and the target. So if we actually go ahead and edit, we do some kind of edit, we do a save, we go to, I really missed the moderations button. Too bad it's only available to moderators. And what happened? Did I not save? Again, let me just do this next. Save. There we go. Moderation. There's the moderation item. 4 and okay, so there it is. One thing that we can do is we can do a comment and approve to make sure that once this does get loaded, our includes work. So the part where we actually said that, what's it called, mod item controller, this part right here. So our view model, the way that we extract the comments and the reviews, and we use their own respective view models. And this is the part where if we need a separate model for the moderation item view model, this is where we go to the comment, we copy the projection, and we, create a separate projection for the moderation item. We just call it moderation item projection, and we reuse this function. Okay, and that's pretty much it. So this seems like it's working fine. Now let's go ahead and see if the versioning is actually working. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into the tricking library. I'm going to go into the backflip. I'm going to do another edit. I'm just going to put 2s here just so I can distinct between the 2. So going back to the moderation screen, let me actually duplicate it so I can do it on different screens. So this one's here the 2, this one's here the 4, and the 5 doesn't have the comments and the review, so all that stuff is working great. Let's go ahead and approve this. So approve and approve. Right, so if we go back to the, it should have been on the moderation screen here. So it reloaded. So you can see this one is passed. So if we go into the backflip here, this is the part, if I refresh it, we get this newly updated backflip. Now what should happen on the 5, if we approve it 3 times, the exception should be thrown, and really this is where we should be getting the new current. So, and I think this is something that's actually happening now. So if we look at the traffic, we're getting the moderation item 3, and the ID is actually 5. So if we preview this, maybe there is no version here, so we might want to add a version here, but the important thing is that the backflip version is 5 for the current, I think, because the current request is made first, and this number 5 is here. So we have the migration context is actually working correctly here. So let's go ahead and prove this a couple of times. Here we get the exception. And yeah, so we got the exception. Now we want to basically make sure that the UI knows about this, okay? And again, I'm just going to go into the... what am I going to go into? I'm going to go into the tricks view model, and I'm just going to make sure that I'm going to grab the version. Why not? Right, I'm just going to grab the version. I'm going to display it. This is where in the UI I will be able to compare the two versions. Another thing that I potentially want to do into the moderation item controller, if I scroll all the way down here, when we actually do this, let's go ahead, try catch here. And what we will do is we will actually do this a little bit more elegantly. A bad request, and because what we're doing here is invalid version exception. And the message here, right? So then we can display some kind of pop-up, or maybe some kind of more, you know, some kind of error that is a little bit more relevant, right? So when we're actually catching this, we're going to be returning just a message, not just throwing an exception into the wild. And this is where what I will do is, because we're actually setting the version, I will create a computer property here. And we'll just call this outdated. And we'll do this only if this, what's it called? Current. And this dot item. So only if we have them, I think we can just return this as a clause, right? Like this. And this dot item dot version minus this dot current dot version less than or equals. No, that's not a thing. Less than or equals 0. So pretty much the same clause as in our what's it called, migration context, right? So if we have this outdated bit, I'm just gonna do a really, you know, dirty kind of solution. So because I value positives a little bit more, I'll just do VF here. I'll say outdated here, and if it's not outdated, just display the actions. But otherwise, we're gonna put the outdated here, and we're gonna say that it's outdated, and we're not gonna allow people to review it. And perhaps we won't even display it in the original moderation item list, because I think that's actually something that we should do, because there is nothing to review here, essentially. Maybe it's something that we still want to see, but maybe not. So on the moderation page here, let me come back to it. Let me refresh it. On the backflip here, let me refresh it as well. What we'll do is we'll do a couple edits. We'll do the first edit. We'll save it. We'll do the next edit. We'll save it. On here, let me refresh this. Get the two things here. I'll approve this twice. I'll go back. I'll go to the next moderation item, and it's outdated, right? So this is pretty much it. And the last part that we really need to make this as a sound process, because if somebody updates the first item and it's updated and somebody's still reviewing this and it requires that last review, right? We want to, you know, and imagine if they get pressed. Right now, they are going to get an exception that there has been a version change or an item is outdated. But here, if they essentially press the button at the same time, what could happen is there could be a concurrency issue there. So this is the part where we actually want to handle this a little bit more gracefully. So this is, again, it shouldn't be too much work, but it is something that we should think about. But nevertheless, this will be it for this episode. Again, I apologize because it has been quite long. Thank you very much for watching. If you have any questions, make sure to ask them in the comment section or in my Discord server. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already. I stream on Wednesdays and Sundays, so join that if you're into that kind of thing. Also, join my Discord server. Some really nice conversations happen there. You want to be part of the community. And hopefully, I'll see you in the next episode.